Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran and patch 9.1 has more exciting Legos on the horizon. We finally have something for monks to test, and these legendaries all function, and they are still going through iterations, but at least you can equip them and smack train dummies for a bit. We also have updates for the priest legendaries as well as tooltips, but no functionality for the legendaries of warlocks, the hunters, as well as shamans. However, in this video, we'll still take a look at the legendaries themselves, their feasibility in terms of what the legendaries themselves bring. Not particularly talking about if these legendaries are going to be replacing already existing class Legos, but rather just want to take a look at these by themselves because there's probably going to be more work in on them for patch 9.1. However, these updates are looking really cool, and we'll start with some of the more exciting stuff, which are the monk Legos. Starting off with monks and Venthyr, which is the covenant that I'm currently playing. The legendary is called Sinister Teaching. During your covenant ability Fallen Order, you will summon one additional adept based on your spec. It'll be a adept of your spec, so like a damage monk for a damage dealer, a tanky monk for a tank class. You will have that adept there for an extra 24 seconds, so a whole extra image fighting for you. While you have an active adept, your crits reduce the cooldown of Fallen Order by 3 seconds. For my testing, I've been able to get it down to as close as I could to 2 minutes. Taking a 3-minute cooldown and taking it down to almost 2 minutes makes it super powerful because, first of all, as a Windwalker, this lines up together with your Zuen, so even more damage during those phases. But even for tanks and healers, you do summon monks that heal and summon monks that do give you some defensive value, so then it becomes a cooldown to use for your party or for yourself. I overall like when Blizzard is doing this, like, oh man, my covenant ability is a 3-minute cooldown, it doesn't fit super well or kind of fits awkwardly into the class playstyle, and certain legendaries that reduce the cooldown of that ability based on how well you play can give you a much smoother timings with their CDs, so I really like this one just on paper by itself. The carrying ability of Weapons of Order will now call on an extra Celestial, a Zuen, a Yulon, which can also be the Red Crane Chi-Ji if you are talented as a Mist River into Chi-Ji, or a Nyuazawa. This spawns a second Celestial, so for Windwalker monks, that's an extra pet. A pet that does more damage the harder you hit the enemy. For a healer, that could be separated specifically where you'll have, let's say, Red Crane or Yulon for one boss mechanic, and then you can use Weapons of Order as a big group heal for another boss mechanic. For tanks, that is an extra Nyuazawa who does have some damage components, but he does also help you take on some of the stagger onto himself, so it is a defensive. This way, healers and tanks can actually spread out their cooldowns differently, and Weapons of Order becomes not just a mastery increase, but now the Celestial that comes with it can give you more tankiness, more healing output. So I really like the dynamic that the Kyrian Legendary offers. The Necrolord Covenant ability is Bountiful Brew. Your abilities have a chance to proc Bone Dust Brew on your targets. Bone Dust Brew does a bit of damage in an AoE, debuffs enemies or buffs allies, where your abilities have a chance to do more healing to that ally or more damage to that enemy as shadow damage. Bone Dust Brew also does have benefits towards the tanks to give them more stagger, more healing through the mastery for the healing spec, and for Windwalker, more spins with Spin and Crane Kick. This legendary I wanted to test how often does it proc, and for my testing it can train damage for at least 3 minutes, it seems to proc once a minute, which is not that terrible. So with the ability being a minute CD, the proc being once every minute or so, you're basically getting 2 brews in a single window, more or less. So every time you throw in a brew, and by the time it's back up, you would have thrown 2 brews, one from your actual active ability and the other from the proc. I don't think this is a bad Lego, and generally RNG Legos are not very liked by players, but this one seems to be pretty consistent. I don't really know how strong Necrolord is for Windwalkers in particular, but could be potentially something good for the other 2 specs. Finally, for the Night Fade, we have Feline Harmony, which doubles your chance to reset Feline Stomp, and enemies affected by Feline Stomp also take 8% more damage, or allies affected by Feline Stomp take 8% more healing. Not a bad Covenant, but I feel like it's not really an issue with the Covenant Legendary, but rather with the Covenant itself. Felines are good if enemies can stand inside of it, but in Mythic Pluses and in raids, bosses and adds constantly are on the move. Sometimes the tanks just need to reposition, and if they're not in your Feline, there isn't much you can do. I think some of the things that Blizzard have been able to do so far with Covenant legendaries is to fix certain pitfalls or gaps of Covenant abilities. For example, if an ability is more single target focused, giving it AoE opportunity makes it a bit more competitive against other Covenants, or making long CD abilities shorter allows them maybe more play inside of dungeons and raids. So in a sense, I've been looking at some of the Covenant Legos as almost like a fixes for some of the pitfalls of Covenant abilities, natural advantages but also disadvantages that they may come with. And one of the things that I noticed that maybe they should have done for Fae, and that would have been a perfect idea, is instead of allowing it double the chance to reset while standing in the Fae line, allow it to get a reset of still same 6% outside of the Fae line. With this legendary, you'll be able to reposition your Fae line a lot more often and have more consistently ability to reset it, because right now you have to stay in the Fae line to get a chance for it to even get a re-proc, which is kind of where the benefit of the Covenant ability even comes from. So if Blizzard were to just adjust that part and make it so that you can reset Fae lines and reset the ability while being outside of it with this legendary, I think it'll be a much stronger Lego. Overall, really cool idea, but I do think they should go one step further. Next, we have Priest legendary changes, and I'm not a Priest main, and I don't even have a max level Priest, so it's not like I can really comment too much about the feasibility of these legendaries, but we do have some adjustments and confirmation on some of them. Kyrian legendary, it looks like it is going to be coming out as it has been found in the data mining, where it too, like the Venthyr, will have a cooldown reduction aspect of the Boon of the Ascended Kyrian ability, turning it from potentially a 3-minute cooldown to a 2-minute cooldown. The Night Fae legendary has gotten changed, where you enter a pact with the Death Loa, calling forth a Haunted Mask that lingers on a target until Fae Guardians ends. Haunted Mask copies the benefits of current fairy on its target, follows your direct masks. And finally, you have the Venthyr ability, Shadow Ward Manipulation, also getting adjusted. Mind Games lasts additional 3 seconds and reverses an additional 10% damage or healing. When Mind Games can no longer reverse healing or damage, gain 3% critical strike for each second remaining for 10 seconds. So the Blizzard is continuing to do adjustments to both of these legendaries. I haven't got to play with them whatsoever, so I can't really comment. I just wanted to update you guys on the updates to these specific Legos. The next few legendaries for these classes cannot be tested, as in you can craft the legendaries, but the tooltip for them is wrong. All of them reads the Lightning Bolt effect for the Necrolord Shaman legendary, and when you try them on testing dummies, none of them seem to work properly. So hopefully they'll be viable next week. However, Blizzard has been making some adjustments to them, even though we can't really test them in terms of tooltips, number changes, and tuning. Which is funny because we can't even test them in the first place, so was there to tune. But anyway, we'll take a look at those legendaries and talk about how good they might be potentially. First of those legendaries is going to be from the Kyrian Covenant, Pact of the Soul Stalkers. When Resonating Arrow deals damage to a target, your party gains 10% increased critical strike chance. I think Blizzard is automatically trying to make the support legendaries not as strong, as it seems a lot of the support abilities, Covenant's abilities and such, in World of Warcraft are generally marked down as a little bit lower. During the early versions of Beta and Alpha, a lot of players found themselves to be enjoying the abilities that make them do more damage rather than watching their party succeed. And I feel like Blizzard is just trying to avoid making certain classes feel like, oh, you have to be this Covenant, this class as a mandatory option. Because imagine if they made this legendary like 20%, 30%, 50% critical strike chance for your party. All it would mean that every hunter in a raid will have to go Kyrian. They'll be thrown in the party with mages and warlocks, and then they will provide this crit buff for warlocks and mages, and it will be less of a choice of which Covenant you want to play, but you now have to play this support playstyle. And I really do think the Blizzard should potentially buff Pact of the Soul Stalkers a little, maybe give it a little bit of crit, a little bit of haste for your party, but not so much that it becomes mandatory. I really like the ability to give players the opportunity to support their groups, and I think this is a perfect opportunity where some players really do want to play that support playstyle. So players that do want to should have a decent legendary, decent playstyle, decent Covenant abilities that do enough. Not enough to become a mandatory must-have meta playstyle, but if they do decide to do keys with their group, and they're like, you know what, we do have a lot of classes that benefit from crit, maybe running this legendary might not be that bad. I do think they should buff it a little bit of crit, a little bit of haste won't hurt nobody as a option. I think it's a cool playstyle. I don't think it's going to be strong as it is right now though. Necrolord Bag of Munitions is an awesome legendary that I'm anticipating to play with because it has been gotten nerfed actually, even though we can't test it. It went from 5 targets hit by Death Chakram having explosive shot down to 3 targets, down to 2 targets. So there's definitely some sort of internal testing happening somewhere, just not on PTR. But this legendary looks exciting. It looks awesome for both Mythic Pluses as well as single target. When it comes to Necrolord playstyle, I'm really hoping big for this one because the cooldown of the actual chakram is so small. It's just 45 seconds, so you'll be able to use this quite frequently in your playstyle. Very excited to test this one out. This one seems really exciting overall. Cannot wait to see what this one is going to play like, but I have definitely high hopes. Explosive shot as an ability is a decent ability for marksman, and being able to get it for Beastmaster or survival would be really cool. Then we have the Night Fae legendary, which doesn't seem all that strong right now. When Wild Spirits hits fewer than 5 targets, so 4 targets, 3, 2, as well as 1, has a 35% chance to Wild Spirits a second time on the target. This one is kind of like taking the original interaction between Marksmanship Hunter, that Serpent Sting legendary, and Wild Spirits ability where your aim shot triggered a Wild Spirits. The poison from the aim shot legendary also triggered a second Wild Spirit, allowing you quite a lot of burst for AoE, but also very strong single target damage. This legendary, however, tries to give you a little bit of a similar playstyle, but it doesn't seem that good. If it was a 100% chance to get a second Wild Spirits, that it'd be more considered by hunters, but from the guys that I talked to, they're not looking at this too well. 35% chance could be decent if you get good procs, but if you roll low, then it's pretty much lost value. Very niche for less than 5 target situations, so I guess it could be good for 2 target, 3 target if it procs, but 35% chance is kind of low. Venthyr 1 is going to be one of those things that I talked about earlier, kind of like a legendary that allows your Covenant ability to be fixed to do things that it normally can't do. So bonus kill shots from Flayed Shot cost 6 targets within 8 yards to bleed for 35% of the damage dealt by kill shot over 6 seconds. Kill shot, Flayed Shot interaction is a very single target focused, while the other Covenants do have some possibility for multiple target damage. So this transforms a pure single target into potential AoE. It's only bleed over the last 6 seconds after kill shot, which can crit to do more damage, so a crit heavy playstyle with it could be pretty good. I like this one a lot. This one could be good on single target, it could be decent on AoE, it could be decent on cleaves. I honestly can't wait to test this one out. Very excited because I play Venthyr Hunter myself. I like the playstyle, and I'm very excited to see how this legendary will end up functioning and working out when it comes to the damage numbers and the sims. With Warlocks, we're going to start off with Shard of Annihilation as a Necrolord ability. Decimating Bolt increases the critical strike chance and crit damage of your next empowered ability, empowered by Decimating Bolt, which is Soul Drain if you talent into it as Affliction, normally Shadow Bolt, Incinerate for Destruction, and Demon Bolt for Demonology. More damage, more crit, and I kind of like how it plays into the crit damage aspect. I think it's pretty neat. It's very straightforward. More damage for a single target focused ability. Not much you can really say there. Then we have Languishing Soul Detritus, where Scouring Tithe ability for the Kyrian. When this ability generates a soul shard, and that happens when you put the Scouring Tithe dot on the enemy, and the enemy dies before the dot runs out, then the ability will now also give you 100% movement speed and 40% increased crit chance for 8 seconds. The crit combo could be pretty good. The window is pretty small, but also timing this is going to be pretty difficult. You have to put the dot on a mob, make sure the mob dies at the right time so you can get the bonus, so you can maximize the 8 seconds worth of duration. Maybe could be good in Mythic Pluses, maybe could be good in raid boss fights where there's an add, but timing this up and lining up with your cooldowns to maximize the value, I think could prove to be quite difficult. Decaying Soul Satchel is for the Night Fae. Each target affected by Soul Rot increases your haste and crit chance by 5% for 8 seconds. On a single target, 5% crit and haste isn't a lot. On 4 targets, 20% crit and haste is quite decent. I think these numbers on multiple targets can actually be quite good, and I imagine this is going to be pretty decent in at least some sort of fight somewhere in the game. Then we have the Venthyr with Contained Perpetual Explosion, and I gotta say, the Warlock legendaries for the Covenants have really long names. Impending Catastrophe's final explosion damage is increased by 75% plus 15% for each additional target it hits on the way to its final target. The Venthyr ability is pretty bad for single target, it's pretty good for AoE. I don't know if running this legendary will make it all of a sudden BIS. I will be surprised if it does. But definitely the high numbers of 75% more damage, 15% per target it hits. I think those big numbers do hold a bit of potential. For Shamans, we'll start off with Venthyr, and we're starting with a legendary that's actually Torghast power. Up to 5 friendly targets healed by Chain Harvest have Riptide applied to them. Up to 5 enemy targets damaged by Chain Harvest have Flame Shock applied to them. This one isn't amazing for enhancement. Flame Shocks and Riptides are kind of cool. For Elemental, you can actually have pretty long Flame Shocks together with your Earth or Fire Elemental, so I think there could be some sort of value, more Lava Bursts. But I think where this suits best is a Restoration Shaman in Mythic Plus keys, providing healing for allies but also Flame Shocks to enemies to play the Battle Shaman playstyle, chucking out Lava Bursts themselves. For your Necrolords, we have Splintered Elements. Each additional Lightning Bolt generated by a Primordial Wave increases your haste by 5% for 10 seconds. This one is different. If you're Elemental, it's actually Lava Burst instead of Lightning Bolt, and I think for Restoration, it's a Healing Surge instead of Lightning Bolt, but could be haste after you use that trigger ability off of your Primordial Wave. Don't really know how good that one will be, sounds kind of boring on paper. The Nightfare ability reads, each pulse of Phase Transfusion damage effect reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirits, your Healing Tide Totem, or your Fire Elemental by a set amount. So during Phase Transfusion, you actually have a bunch of different ticks of the damaging ability, so it's quite rapid CDR. With also conduits that can reduce the cooldown of Phase Transfusion ability as well, it could be more CDR going forward. CDR is always interesting because it's just cooldown reduction for certain abilities. You get certain powerful cooldowns back quicker, and generally can be pretty strong on certain few classes. So it works out for mages, maybe it'll work out for shamans as well. Interesting one, definitely needs more testing. For Curian, you get Raging Vesper Vortex. When all charges of Vesper Totem are consumed, Vesper Totem will radiate one final 15-yard burst of arcane damage and healing. At first, it doesn't really sound like much. Maybe needs more testing against actual trained dummies in order to make sure exactly how to trigger it. Do you actually have to do all the damaging charges and the healing charges? And that would be kind of awkward as a, let's say, Elemental Shaman, go for like 3 Chain Lightnings and then start healing your allies so you can proc this Lego. That could be pretty awkward, so we'll have to wait until we can get more testing on that one. I want to thank you guys for checking out this video. Let me know what you think about the new legendaries for all the classes we covered here. Let me know your thoughts, which ones do you think are looking good and which ones should be sent back for a rework. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.